One thing that I'm passionate about is helping women write books. But more importantly, I'm passionate about helping women actually be able to sell their books as well. If you write an amazing book, it can have all the amazing content in the world, but if you don't get it into the hands of the people that need it most, what good does that really do? Unfortunately, none at all. And so I want to talk to you guys today about the importance of creating a good book cover. Now, let's be real. Books are 100% judged by their cover. And so if you don't create an appealing cover to your audience, it'll never be able to get into the hands of them. So figuratively speaking, if someone is scrolling Amazon or walking into Barnes and Nobles and your cover doesn't pop out to them, it's going to be difficult to get them to even open it up or understand what's inside of the book and how it can benefit them. So part of creating a really thorough and good cover is understanding your audience. What colors speak to them? What images are going to appeal to them in relation to your book? What words stand out for them? I'm going to be really honest with you guys, but on my journey of writing my very first book, I wanted to create a book about productivity. At the time, I was a single mom and just wanting to really help people, very passionate about helping people be able to balance and juggle a lot. Because at that time, I was working a full-time job, working a part-time job, going to grad school full-time, raising my 2 children, and writing a book. And so people would always ask me all these steps about productivity. And I'm like, man, I could just share these things with them and it could be life-changing. And so for me, I felt like the productivity tips that I wanted to teach could benefit everyone. And while that's true, if you write a book to everyone, you actually write a book to no one. And so at that time, I had to really narrow down and understand my audience. Now, prior to me understanding this, I was trying to write a book for everyone. Meaning that the very first book that I wrote was just called Quick Tips because I felt like everyone could benefit from these quick tips. And I remember it was like this grayscale black cover with pink writing because I felt like the black and gray would speak to the men and the pink would speak to the women. But what really ended up happening is everyone sort of rejected it. Nobody purchased the book. When I went back to the drawing board, I was able to incorporate things that were important for my audience so they knew immediately what they were going to get from my book. So I'm going to show you my cover. This is my book, Quick Tips for Busy Women. It's hard to see with the lighting in my office. Apologize. But basically, this book, when I went back the second time, I was able to be more strategic about the way in which I approached writing this book. So, for example, Quick Tips for Busy Women. It started off with it just being the title, Quick Tips. And then when I realized, okay, who do I really want to speak to? And I really understood that. I started to speak to women and I wanted to speak to these women and what they needed. And a constant word that I was hearing over and over again was busy. I'm just so busy. Everything's just so chaotic and confusing. And so even the subtitle was cutting through the confusion and finding clarity because they were like, everything's so chaotic, everything's so confusing, everything's so overwhelming. And so I wanted to be able to speak to them so that they understood that this book was for them. Not only that, but I took some of my market research and went in depth and started to ask them questions like, what does it feel like when you feel confusing? And so for them, they were like, it feels like a ton of things spinning in my head. And so I took that and I made this little like lady with these things spinning around her head, all of these obligations, all these different ways she's being pulled in all these different directions. And I was very intentional about creating this book to speak to them. Now, here's the thing. When I talk about covers and making sure that your cover speaks to your audience, this includes the title, the subtitle, the font, the design, the synopsis. It includes all of those. Because even if you have a great image on the front, if the synopsis is not very clear about what your audience is looking for, then that can be difficult because then they also won't think that you're necessarily speaking to them as well. And so with the synopsis, I used a lot of market research. So I talked to my audience and I said, what are things that you're struggling with? What are things you would look for in a book like this? What are things that you wish you knew? What are things that you wish that you'd had help with? What kind of supports are you looking for? What are your pain points? Like what really hurts you or bothers you about this lifestyle? And I spoke to that. I just wrote, the busyness phenomenon in today's society is all consuming and it tricks us into believing that multitasking is an efficient way to get things done. In reality, it makes us less productive, less effective, and more overwhelmed. So immediately, because all these women were talking about, I feel like I'm multitasking, but I'm still overwhelmed. I'm speaking straight to these points within the synopsis so they know immediately. In addition, this cover is speaking to them. In addition, this design is speaking to them. In addition, the font speaks to them because it's very feminine and speaking to my audience. So the goal is you got to know your audience. I also did the same thing with my book, Survive Your Split. So I don't know why this lighting stinks. But with Survive Your Split, if you notice, one of the things that people said is they feel like things are being shredded apart or torn apart, even if they didn't want it to be. And so I took that vision and that information that they gave me, and I determined how to incorporate it into it. I also made sure that my subtitles spoke to my audience. So a lot of people were like, I just feel like I can't heal. I feel like life after divorce is really dull or very, very dim. And so my subtitle is A Guide to Healing and Hope After Divorce. I wanted to really give my audience hope, let them know that there is hope, that you can recover yourself after divorce. So that was my very first book to my very most recent book. And I'm very intentional about that because market research is really, really important when you're designing your cover, because like I said, I'm going to, if you don't remember anything else from this, your book is going to be judged by your cover. And if you're trying to speak to everyone, you speak to no one. I need you to really get that into your system when you're creating this cover, so that you're standing out to your audience in a way that they need it, so that when they scroll on Amazon or when they walk in Barnes and Nobles, immediately like, yep, that book is speaking to me. Yep, I know that I need this. So again, that involves the title, that involves the subtitle, that involves the design, that involves the synopsis, that involves the font. And I also forgot to mention, it involves the price too. So for example, if I write this divorce book and I'm like really passionate about it, I know it can change people's lives, and I'm excited to share this book with the world, but my book is $999, and everyone else's book, in the similar genre is only $12.99 or $19.99. You also want to be very, very fair with price, and relatable to your audience. So when you're creating the cover, the biggest mistake you can make is to create the cover just on a whim, just giving it to somebody and letting somebody create it without really putting any thought or effort into it. Do your market research first so that you have a very thorough view of what the cover is going to look like. And one final suggestion I have for you is not to wait until the end to create your cover, but to create your cover in the beginning. Because when you create it in the beginning, it gives you something to look forward to, something to look at, something to remind you that this process is real and who your audience is and what they're looking for when they open and read your book. So I'm going to let you dive in and get started in creating your cover. There's one final thing that I also like to share is that covers can range in price. Some people can get covers done for $5, and some people can get covers done for upwards of a few $1,000s. But here's the thing, you're often going to get what you pay for. So whenever you're looking for a cover designer, make sure you're looking at their portfolio to see what other designs that they've created, and also consider asking them if they're willing to do a mock-up for you, because a mock-up will also give you the motivation that you need. So if you're starting your writing journey, you don't want to get it printed all the way yet. Maybe get a mock-up in the meantime, and then you can use that. You can frame that. You can put that next to your writing space. You can put it as the screensaver on your phone, whatever you need to give you that motivation, that momentum to keep your writing going. But whatever you do, do not skimp out on the cover, because you could have the greatest content in the world inside your book, but if people can't get past the cover, they'll never be able to receive that. And I don't want you to write your book in vain. I want the people that need your book most to have it in their hands. So that's why I showed up today, to give you the tools that you need to make sure that your audience has a cover that appeals to them. So in turn, they're able to read the book that also changes their life. So I'll let you dive in and get started. And until next time, I will chat with you guys later.